Welcome to What Went Wrong, where today we're going to talk about 2026, what we want to see, what we think is going to happen, and just everything around the new year. Before we kind of get into it, probably should address this is a bit late for a sort of predictions video. Most people do this around New Year's, so I do want to apologise a little bit for that, but hopefully it works well. And to be honest, Max, I don't know if you agree with me, but I just think now we've had a month to kind of see a little bit of 2026. It gives a better impression of kind of what's going to happen.
Reflect.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen a lot of changes already. So, speaking of, shall we start with... Where do you want to start, Max?
Well, I think we start with the Conservative Party.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So...
Particularly Prosper UK, the new organisation.
Yes, ultimately, the issue of the Conservatives right now, they don't really have a place on the right wing. There's a lot of politically homeless people that previously would have been Conservative that now not really sure if they have their place in that party, and I would argue I might be one of them. I do want to clarify I'm a Conservative member, but I wouldn't say I'm particularly happy with the party at the moment. I would make a lot of changes if I had the opportunity to. What would you say?
Yeah, well, the whole point of the organisation, Prosper UK, which was founded by the Mayor of the West Midlands, was to accommodate the politically homeless voters, which is what they're saying, mainly people in the Blue Wall in the south of England who are more socially liberal and aren't necessarily on board with the Conservative messaging. And the whole point of this organisation is for the Conservatives to be an alternative to the rise of reform, since they're still topping the polls, and they have been for about half a year now.
Yeah. I'm just going to read out the sort of Wikipedia description for anyone that's not heard of Prosper UK. Prosper UK is a British Conservative Party political movement that launched earlier this year in January. The organisation was founded by Ruth Davidson, as you said, the former leader of the Scottish Conservatives, alongside Andy Street, who was the former mayor of the West Midlands, and a few other sort of Conservatives. The aim of the movement is to appeal to what the founders described as politically homeless voters and to bring the Conservative Party back to the centre-right. So an important clarification, sorry, my camera's shaking. An important clarification is it's not a new party. It's a movement to kind of go alongside the Conservatives, right? To act as a reform for the Conservatives. Not to be confused with Reform UK.
Yeah, potentially influenced Badenoch. However, she's kind of dismissed them.
Yes, she
and
in
their
her
new
speech
organisation,
recently.
which is an interesting move.
Yeah, do you have a quote or anything? Because I can't remember exactly what she said. But she kind of just said she's not worried about it, right?
Yeah, she sort of just said, "Oh, they're wets. I'm not interested."
Yeah, it's an interesting move. I feel like that was the wrong thing to do.
Do you think?
I think she needs to address the issue in her party more than she is. She's been kind of playing off all her issues a lot, especially with the defections. She's kind of just said, "Oh, we don't want them anyway. You know, they're traitors. I'm not bothered," which is probably partly true. But I think she needs to address the issue at hand. Otherwise, it's going to keep happening, and it's just going to keep feeding into reform, and that's not what she wants. It's the opposite of what she wants, every way.
Well, they've had 5 defections. I mean, a lot of the argument from Badenoch's side of the Conservative Party is that they failed their former Tory ministers who weren't really that popular, and so it's actually improving the party in a way.
Because they're down to is it 117 MPs now?
116, I think.
16.
Something like that. Down from 121.
Yeah, it's much more detrimental than she's playing it out to be, and I think she needs to, if she wants to be that strong leader she wants to be, she needs to be able to address her issues properly, I think, and that's probably a key issue, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think of her stance on net zero and the ECHR? Because that is where they've moved further to the right.
Yeah, again, I think it's kind of difficult. I think it depends on your perspective on it. I think, you know, it might draw away some Reform voters back to Conservative if that's a big key issue that they think's important, because obviously ECHR is important for immigration, and a lot of Reform voters are very hyper fixated on immigration. So I think that might help in that situation. But again, it's not going to help those more central right voters that don't really know where to stand and might be drawn to Labour. I find myself more and more drawn to Labour every day because it's there's not really a clear position on kind of where to be, really. Yeah, no, I do, honestly, I really do.
Well, it's an issue for all parties, really.
Mm.
There's an argument that the Lib Dems will steal voters from the Conservatives because, like we saw in the 2024 election, the Lib Dems were able to take a lot of these southern seats from quite affluent areas because they were more socially liberal. They probably weren't happy with Brexit. There was a lot of dissatisfaction around there, and so they were able to vote Lib Dem and weaken the Tories' main source of support in the UK.
Mm. And they need to stop defections. That's another important thing for the Conservatives for this year. She needs to have she not only just have loyal MPs, but make sure that she doesn't lose MPs, because she's kind of having that message of, if we lose them, it doesn't really matter because we only want the loyal ones, but we need to make them all loyal so that none of them leave. And otherwise, she just looks weaker and weaker and gets further away from being the default right, which is kind of what the Conservative Party is meant to be at its core, right?
Yeah, I mean, do you think it's part of a wider strategy? Do you think that Badenoch thinks that's the best way to counter reform? Or is it a stubbornness in her leadership is the ultimate question?
I think probably a bit of both. I think we need to just kind of play time and see what happens, really. I'm not sure how much of a difference it's making to reform, positively or negatively. I don't think we know enough to really know what's going to happen in that regard.
Yeah, well, I think the Lib Dems, as much as they're somewhat popular in the polls, they haven't really had much relevance recently, and their potential political move could be to attract a lot of these centre-right, more moderate Conservative voters, and that's probably the best hope for them, because the Lib Dems message, they are the only party pushing EU integration. That was the vote on the customs union that they put forward, and in general, Labour haven't really talked about it. They're much more on the side of make Brexit work rather than integrate more into the EU. And it's whether the Lib Dems will look appealing, especially with the global situation, with the relations of America and China, whether EU integration is what will help their popularity.
Yeah, I just kind of want to ask, because I was just looking at the polls, because I was thinking this, that the Lib Dem haven't been going up in the polls at all, with kind of weakening Conservative and Labour. So I'm kind of surprised in that people seem to be steering much more towards Green and Reform than Lib Dem, and I find that quite interesting, really. Why do you think that might be, just from your perspective?
Well, it could be to do with messaging. Reform and Green are two very big alternatives to the current main two parties, whereas the Lib Dems seem to be, they are, and they've always been one of the three big main parties, and so they need to sort of differentiate themselves, because people are fed up with Labour and Conservative governments, frankly, and so if they are to succeed, they need to differentiate themselves from the main two parties.
So if we're going to give a message to Lib Dem for what they need to do in 2026, is that to just be more active in politics and kind of play on the weakening of Conservative and Labour?
But has that already been taken over by the Greens and Reform? Is the ultimate question.
But there are definitely much more central people that aren't willing to vote Labour or Green.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the big one now, which is Labour. They need a lot of work, in my opinion. You might say differently, but there's a lot to talk about for Labour. So
people on the Labour side
take the floor.
Well, the Labour Party at the minute, we were originally were going to record this, we're going to do about Andy Burnham and how he could potentially challenge in the by-election as an MP. Obviously now he's been denied by the committee.
Do you want to, just really quick, for anyone that doesn't know, do you want to kind of talk about who Andy Burnham is?
Well, he's a fairly popular figure. He's the mayor of Manchester, and he's been elected 3 times. He's won 3 elections.
Yeah.
Last time he got 64% of the vote. He's very much a sort of soft left kind of figure in the Labour Party. He's brought the buses into public ownership, transport, and many see him as quite successful in Manchester. And
he's very well liked
as a leader.
From the left.
Yes.
Yeah. So we were originally going to talk about Andy Burnham and that we want to seat him as the new leader of Labour, because that would be a much needed rebrand. But things have happened, and it's looking like that's not going to be the case, unfortunately, because they are too loyal to Keir Starmer, which is fair enough, ish. But yeah.
Well, so the reason they're loyal is because they don't want to be portrayed as weak, because they've only been in power a year and a half. And a replacement of leader at this point, in their view, would compromise their political position.
And it would look really bad for them to already be replacing the leader. Not look great for a government. My main sort of quarry, is that the right word? Issue with Labour is the U-turns. I think they need to fix that. They need to stop U-turning. They need to make a decision. They need to actually think about it and be firm on a decision, because right now Kemi Badenoch's getting a lot of material for her own speeches saying, we suggested this, that, and they ended up doing it. So in order for them to actually look like they're making their own decisions, they need to stand on ground a little bit, be a bit firmer.
Yeah.
Because, already this year...
Which of the U-turns do you think?
Go on.
Which of the U-turns are the most damaging, do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, already this year, the digital ID has been a kind of a big one, because that was one that Kemi Badenoch talked a lot about and advocated for it to be scrapped, and they've now scrapped it. And it was quite a big pledge for them at the time. What?
They're still implementing it.
I thought
just
they were
not mandatory.
I thought it was getting scrapped.
The mandatory IDs.
No?
I believe the mandatory ID is gone.
Oh, okay.
But it's an optional thing, I believe.
Oops. Anyway, but the whole concept, they're reducing it massively either way. Kemi Badenoch's quite a big fan of that, and I think that was quite a big pledge for them, really, for them to have sort of backed up on a bit. And the 2-child benefit cap from the budget, that was a bit of a controversial one.
Yeah, very controversial. 6 MPs were suspended for supporting it in the 24 budget, and then they implement it the next year. It's complete.
It's a bit of a mess
politically. Yeah.
They just need to pick what they want to do, and they need to just go through with it, because they're just feeding other parties material to take the piss out of them for, and it's not really what they want for their image. Have you got anything else to say before we move?
Oh yeah, for a government with a 160-seat majority, comparable to like Blair's majority in '97, there's been no kind of decisiveness, and in terms of clear party messaging, there hasn't really been any. When Blair came to power in '97, if we're going to make that comparison, he was all about education, the NHS, public services, and he was a clear sort of change. But even though Labour ran on change, it just hasn't. They haven't had nearly enough decisiveness in government.
Blair had the power to go through with what he wanted by having a large backing behind him in Parliament, and there's no reason why Keir Starmer shouldn't be able to do that exact same thing. He's just not doing it well enough. To kind of move things on, I think the last point for Labour really is fighting back against the Green Party, and Labour need to show themselves as the competent left, show that they actually are a real governing left, because obviously we've never seen the Green Party in power, so people were still unsure whether they could even manage that. So Labour needs to show themselves that they're the realistic left option that could actually win and manage and what they need.
Well, that's been normally the Conservative electoral strategy, is to present themselves as a stable and clear option, and it's part of the reason they've been so successful, because they can appeal to a broad base of voters. But with Labour at the minute, it seems very chaotic. Some there's the resignation of Angela Rayner, the U-turns, and people generally dissatisfied, especially with what's happened to pubs and business rates. And there's a lot of hatred around the government.
Yeah, we were saying the other day how it's quite interesting that Britain is basically conservative, but then every once in a while people get a little bit bored and vote Labour, and then don't like it, and they switch back. And I think
Do you think that's true?
I think to an extent that's pretty true. I think people generally do still see the Conservatives as the boring but safe option, but then obviously there's a lot of practical issues with it. The austerity doesn't necessarily work, and people end up deciding they need a change, but then the change doesn't work all that well either. I think it's kind of a dangerous cycle of disappointment, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's whether the Conservatives have upheld that image, really, because after the 2024 election, they were completely wiped out. And so, can they uphold their image as the party of stability, especially with the defections, and a lot of lifelong Conservative voters who have their own set of values may consider Reform UK, or even the Liberal Democrats, as another option.
Yeah, I think, the build-up to the 2024 general election, there was a lot of issues with the Conservative Party that did damage their reputation a lot as a safe option, because they've never really, been revolutionary in any way. But I think there were a lot of, not in recent times, I would argue.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. But then obviously with kind of Liz Truss and Boris Johnson, there were a few sketchy prime ministers that damaged their reputation quite a bit, really. So I think, and I think that would have been a great time for Labour and Starmer to really work off of that and show themselves to be the powerful party. And I don't think they've really done that.
Well, that's probably why they won the election. Because that was how they presented themselves. Their slogan was change. And so people sort of got on board with that, but have they delivered?
I think they won the election from Conservative failure, not from their own strength. Not at all.
But people are still willing to vote Labour.
Because there's no real other viable option, whereas in the next election, I think people will see there's more parties that actually could be options to vote for. I think we won't see the same kind of dynamics in elections that we have been seeing for a very, very long time. Right, should we move on to the Green Party? Yeah. An interesting one, the Green Party. They're already doing pretty well. There's not too much criticism you can do, but if you want to sort of start, we can.
When Polanski became leader in September, that was completely kind of revolutionary for them. In terms of their membership, it's crazy that we now live in a country where the Green Party's got more members than the Conservative Party. That would have never have happened 2 or 3 years ago. And in particular with his campaign videos recently, there's been a lot of focus on ordinary people paying their bills, and the core of Zach Polanski's support is revolving around himself as this ordinary person who cares about ordinary people and is ultimately anti-establishment and wants to give wealth to people. Much more sort of left-wing redistribution sort of idea.
So do you think that Green have got a chance to, not in terms of membership necessarily, but overtake Labour in sort of some ways, as in become much more powerful than Labour?
What, in the next election?
Yeah, do you think that there's a chance that they end up getting more votes than the Labour Party?
I don't see it happening, personally, because the Greens, I think they will increase their seat share and there will be sort of a rallying of support, but ultimately a lot of their stances on key issues, the nuclear disarmament campaigns and general hostility towards stuff like nuclear power, and they will struggle to rally behind a lot of support across the country, is the main issue.
Yeah. I'd say that a big thing that differentiates them from Labour is they're very kind of specific in some way. they don't really capture a wide audience because they've got quite harsh policies in some way that, you know, either applies to you or not. I feel like they can't really branch out. There's a quite a limit of how far they can branch out, in my opinion. Don't know how true that really is, but...
Well, it was sort of similar to the Labour Party in the 1980s, where they were attached to a lot of very left-wing policies, nuclear disarmament, or complete nuclear disarmament, and it was very sort of moral. There was a lot of moral people on the left who supported that, and that is the reason. And that's why Tony Blair ultimately had to come in and modernise the party, in many people's view, because they just weren't electable. Whether that's similar to the Green Party at the minute, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting comparison, actually. I've not really thought too much about that, but I get what you mean. Have we got anything else we should mention?
Reform UK? Have we done?
Oh, yeah, we need to talk about reform. That's a good point. I think reform's big issue is the scandals. There's way too much coming out about Farage especially, but I mean, we've seen all sorts. We've seen MPs have major ties with Russia. We've seen Nigel Farage being accused of many slurs and bad things during his school time. I think there's just so many issues going on in that party. It's gone.
Do you think it's a Farage-centric party? Do you think that's where their support lies, or is it in their actual policies? What?
If I'm going to say it bluntly, and maybe too harshly, I'm going to say it's a Farage cult rather than a Farage party. I think there is no party without Nigel Farage. I mean, when Richard Tice was leader, it didn't really have nearly the same prominence as it does now. I think it is all about Farage. People are drawn to him, and without him, they're nothing. I think they don't stand a chance without him. No one else has got sort of charisma like he does.
Yeah.
He's got the sort of Boris Johnson, Ed Davey kind of style of politics where it's about the attitude, right, in some way. I'm sure he wouldn't like that comparison.
Do you think that...
But,
I mean, yeah. Do you think reform will be able to sort of entice the public on the immigration debate? Do you think they'll be able to take a hold of that? Because that is one of their key policies, deportations.
I think until the next general election, the strong opinions about immigration are only going to become more widespread. They're not going to die down. So I don't think that's going to be anything that hinders them at all. I think that will continue to be a help for them up until 28 or 29 or whenever it ends up being. I don't think that's going to die down because Labour aren't doing the actions that the sort of reform supporters want them to do, obviously, because it's very different politics.
They're never going to, really.
No, exactly. So those people that feel that strongly enough about immigration to be reform voters, their opinions aren't going to be swayed by anything that's going to happen. So I think that will always be the focal reason why reform are getting as many supporters as they are, realistically.
I mean, there's a complete lack of faith in like the established parties, and there's sort of an element of desperation that people are going to vote reform because they think, oh well, how worse can it get, really? We may as well give it a try, give them a few years in power. And I think that's a lot of their appeal, is that they're not.
Yeah,
They haven't had a record in government, very similar to sort of Green Party. They haven't had a record in government. It's not necessarily enthusiasm for their ideas, it's more just maybe we should try something new.
And I'll be open, I'm a very central person, and I could never see myself, or I don't really ever see myself voting either of those two parties, but I can 100% understand how people are drawn to them, because it feels like historically we haven't had a correct option for quite a long time. This century, really, I feel like there's not been all that. There's not really been too much comfort in anyone, in any party, and I think people are just, as you said, looking for a new direction. That it's a bit of a risk, but as you said, how bad can it get? It's kind of going to shit anyway. So,
well, that's the prevailing attitude.
So ultimately, What do we need to see in 2026?
Well, it depends on the parties, really. I think an Andy Burnham leadership would help the Labour Party immensely.
Yeah.
I think it was a terrible decision for them to turn that down. It's going to divide the party because Burnham supports a lot more left-wing policies, and Starmer isn't really seen as, well, he's just not popular. He's not a very popular leader.
Yep. I think somehow, some way it needs to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the Conservatives need to have a bit of a rebrand to re-establish themselves as the right-wing party, or at least, give a home to those kind of more central right people that don't really know where to go. And hopefully they will take some lessons from Prosper, and use that to actually establish themselves a bit better.
So you think that's the way forward?
I like the sound of Prosper quite a lot. I don't know how well it'll actually end up being, how good it'll actually end up being.
Yeah.
But from the sounds of it, I like where they're going and I like where their head's at, because I think they're looking at a group of people that don't get enough recognition in politics, really, in that they don't have a party to go to so much.
Yeah.
And I think the Green Party kind of just need to keep doing what they're doing, to be honest.
You think it's effective, the campaigning?
Yeah. I definitely, up until Zach Polanski's influence, would have never even bat an eye to Green Party, but now I see them as a party and not just, an environmental movement, which they kind of
Tree
felt
hoppers.
like.
Yeah.
Exactly. They've kind of just felt like that for a long time. And last but not least, I think Reform just need to sort out the kind of squabbles that are going on within them and sort out their issues, the scandals, clear themselves in the media, I suppose I should say.
Yeah.
Clear themselves in the media.
Do you think that's to do with the Tory defections, or with Farage's behaviours?
I do think that there is an issue there with them being just ex-Tories. I think they need to recruit some new faces and kind of clear their slate a little bit, because they do feel like washed up Tories.